it's your Aaron, and this is part 2 of me talking about some of the games that I would like to make. And in the previous video, I'll hopefully put a link in the description to that so you can go check it out if you want to. I talked about the Space Colony game that I want to make. That's not going to have trade, markets, exchange or bartering, but will have the ability to give people the extra resources or stuff you don't use yourself, to allow people to create mutual aid networks and to really explore that dynamic without it having to be via money in exchange. And then I talked about the second game I want to make, which was talking about an RPG, but one that is not specifically like a video game, but more like Dungeons and Dragons. And yeah, that video ended kind of abruptly because I ran out of storage on my phone, and so it sort of cut off mid-sentence. So I'm just going to finish off the description of that game. I was pretty much done with it though. I was just saying that instead of having to try and pass and fail on your dice rolls, I'm thinking that the system would allow for a automatic pass, kind of like casting Magic Missile in Dungeons and Dragons, where you don't have to roll, you just automatically hit and then you roll for damage. But then the damage that you cause might still be reduced to 0 if there's resistance to it and stuff, so you could still have something ineffectual. But I didn't want to have a case where you've like now tried to do something and either passed or failed. Like, no, you succeeded, but you may not have had an effect. And the reason, one of the main reasons for that is that if you do want to try again, you can. Like in Dungeons and Dragons, like let's say you wanted to try to break down a door. Normally you would do like a strength check, and then you'd roll the dice, and it would be like, you would fail, it would be like, oh sorry, you don't have the strength to do it, or whatever, and like, oh, someone else tried because I failed. Where in this system, you wouldn't fail to try, but it may not have an effect. So let's say the door has 10 HP, and if it's such a strong door and your damage is so low that it resists your efforts down to 0, you know, you can obviously keep trying if you want, but there's not really any point to it. But let's say you do a bunch of damage and it is a strong door, it gets reduced down to 1, well, you know, you could just try it 10 times and eventually you'll break it down. Now, of course, if you kept trying the same thing over and over, then it gives your game master or dungeon master or whatever a lot of time, for example, to bring a security guard and to kind of catch you in the act and stop you. So it's not going to be an automatic pass either, but I just didn't want to have that pass-fail dynamic, mostly because of the feel-bad dynamic, the feel-bad aspect of it, and not wanting to feel like I'm trying to do stuff and getting nowhere. I mean, I would rather realize I'm getting nowhere and stop trying myself than be told that I can't try again because I've failed. And so yeah, the idea with that game is like you would be able to choose any combination of skills you want, and the skills could either be knowledge or crafts or whatever it is. Upgrades to your weapon, upgrades to your cybernetics or your body or gear, or like you would become more proficient at something after trying. So it's like the time you're investing, and you can invest it in anything you want. You don't have to And I was just saying you have to start from the beginning of each of those sort of tech trees. But yeah, let's move on from that game because I did cover it in detail in the previous video. Obviously, like, I do want to have stuff in that game like being able to fly. Obviously, you know, you're going to be able to have any gender, any body type, all of that you want. Like, the idea is for it to be fully customizable, and if possible, I even want to have it to where you can like customize your neurotype, and like say whether your character is more sensitive to like the different senses, like maybe really sensitive to light, and then you could also maybe specify the range. So maybe being more sensitive to light, you can have better vision in the dark compared to someone that isn't extra sensitive, but then you might want to wear sunglasses or whatever when you're out, or have transition contacts or what have you. But yeah, let's move on. So the next game I want to talk about is actually a sort of like a trading card game. Again, something that I want to be able to be playable physically with paper and stuff, but also when I actually do it, I'm probably going to write an app for it as well. So a lot of TCG type games do have an app. You can think of Hearthstone as an example, and then you get games like Magic the Gathering that, you know, you can play physically and there's an app for it as well. But I'll try and make the game from the beginning more easily portable to an app than maybe Magic, which is quite complex because it was initially designed for, you know, for physical paper or cardboard or whatever, and so it still is portable, but it's difficult because of how complex it gets, I guess, and how much, you know, you have to keep track of, and the interface gets quite difficult for that, because when you're playing in person, you know, it's easy to just be like explaining like I'm doing this and then I'm doing that, and like have the meta discussion and did you mean this or that, and you can sort it out. Whereas like the app, it's got to be not allow you to do the wrong things, basically, so that, you know, everything you can do is hopefully a legal action, so that you can not have to have in-person clarifications and stuff. So the idea for this game, though, is I'm still trying to figure out if it's going to be player versus player, or co-op, or player versus obviously environment competitively, or co-op, or player versus player, but leaning towards something that is maybe more player versus environment. And what I want to do with this game is to have the colors of the cards or the classes or whatever be linked to different types of anarchist ideologies. Obviously, won't be including things like anarcho-capitalism, because it isn't actually anarchism, and it's also not going to have mutualism, because again, I don't agree that that is anarchism. But it is going to have like stuff like green anarchism, anarcho-pacifism, anarcho-syndicalism, anarcho-communism, and potentially stuff like illegalism. And then the cards are all going to be themed according to what strategy those particular ideologies have. And the mechanics are going to hopefully be playable in such a way that it, even if it's just a close approximation, or, you know, just like a loose copy of the strategy, but taking place within the game, hopefully act as almost like an educational tool to help people understand the different diversities of tactics. So, for example, what sometimes let's take anarcho-pacifism for an example. A lot of people think that what that means is liberal pacifism. They think it means loyalty and dedication to non-violence, which isn't what anarcho-pacifism is at all, in my opinion. What it is, in my opinion, is the belief that there is non-violent tactics that need to be emphasized, arguably more so than violent tactics. So things like building an economy and a way of governing yourselves so that you can actually abolish capitalism in the States. Because once you are able to move away from capitalism, then tactics like how to take on the powers that be, how to agitate and gearing up for revolution, and all those things start kicking in. But none of those things are going to end in anarchist socialism at all, unless the non-violent aspects of it, which is like your mutual aid networks, your economy that doesn't use money, and your ability for communities to self-govern, unless all of that's in place, even if you had a revolution and got everyone on board for change, you wouldn't have anything to do after it. You wouldn't be able to, on the fly, create this economy because it's too complex. It requires supply chains, it requires things to have been taking place for months and months so that you've ironed out all the kinks, and you can actually sort of guarantee distribution to those who have need and production of what is needed. Things like that aren't going to be roll-outable instantly or even quickly at all. So it needs to be in place before you get to the revolution. So when you're playing the game, the anarcho-pacifist deck or whatever would be trying to basically out compete, in a way, capitalism, like be better at delivering, meeting needs and delivering goods and services to those that need it, and producing them and making sure that the right things do get produced, that they can get to who needs them in the right quantities. All of that stuff, this deck, a deck that's based on that class or color or ideology, whatever, it's going to be focused on trying to do that, and it's going to be really good at doing it so that you will have sort of like an abundance of resources, and then you could use those extra resources to then attack the establishment, the status quo, the oligarchy, capitalism, the state, etc. And then you could combine, if you wanted to, you could have a deck that had multiple ideologies in it. So you could combine, say, the pacifism with an illegalism set of cards, and then you could have the illegalist cards basically expropriating resources from the capitalist corporations and governments and stuff, and they are going to then be able to funnel those resources to your pacifist, like non-violence economy building, and ramp it up even faster than if it was on its own. But then obviously it's going to bring with it some weaknesses where you are then going to potentially have to struggle more and more than you otherwise would with private security and state security trying to shut you down, because there's going to be like a penalty. So what I'm thinking of is having like sort of almost like two health bars in a way, where the one is like your reputation cost, and if your reputation cost gets to zero, then you lose, because you've effectively killed your reputation in the eyes of the public. Because when we are talking about anarchism, we're talking about socialism, not the authoritarian kind, but the libertarian and the decentralized, etc. kind. Then you do need to win over the hearts and minds of the population. You need them to agree with you that doing things this new way is better. They are going to need to opt into this new economy, new way of self-governing, because they're going to have to be taking on a lot of the responsibilities that currently get left to the state and capitalist institutions. And so when you are talking about moving away from that, you can't just do what you want and then be like, well, we are correct, so just fall in line. No, you also need to make your case to the population and get them to agree with you. So you might have that being a score of maybe 0 to 100. And if you get to 100% or maybe 99% for like nice like in joke or whatever, but then you might win because you're like, cool, everyone's on board, and at that level of adoption nothing can stop you. Or you get to 0 and it's like, okay, there's no amount of work you can do to repair your image. Like maybe you've done stuff that is just so objectionable to the population that it just kills your movement. And then the other sort of health bar would be your resources. But now this one, it's like if you get to 0, then it's like you are almost like bankrupt, like your movement has no funding whatsoever, and you can't continue to feed your activists. You can't, your movements, like they're either going to have to ditch you and get a job or starve, because they won't be able to meet their needs. So if you get to 0, then you lose. But then maybe there is again like 100% of the economy takes place outside of capitalism, then you've won, because you are literally not tied to the capitalist mode of production anymore. So hopefully by playing the game, the way the mechanics work, you in trying to achieve these goals of trying to get to 100% of either of those metrics, you're going to be doing certain things to try and up your reputation, like propaganda, journalism, etc. Or you could be doing things like trying to up your economy, building out your production, getting like a base of support for people's needs, and in trying to achieve that via the different strategies. So if it's syndicalism, you might be trying to get labor unions to connect into syndicates, to do strikes, to expropriate, to increase the wages so that you can up your maybe membership fees, so that you have more resources to plow into mutual aid economy or fund further propaganda or whatever it is. You're gonna be learning how syndicalism works by playing the game. And for like anarcho-communism, you might be trying to get the communities, maybe communities are the ones, instead of syndicates, who are in control of the distribution and production, administration and organizing, and the communities themselves self-govern. So it's not based on like all the industries getting like an entire industry over. It's like maybe more of a geography and a territorial thing. And so things like community gardens, neighborhood crime response, those types of things will be more in the anarcho-communist set of ideology. And it's not to say these ideologies exclude all the others, it's just which they emphasis on. Your agents, your militants, or your people that you are playing cards to put into the arena of politics, I guess, are going to be focusing their efforts on the things they feel are most important, and you choose in the deck building, you choose basically your strategy, and then you have to try and play it out. So what I really like about PvP games is that when it's player versus player, you have to try and like sort of outplay your opponent, and that is actually like really fun. Like, even if you play like a game like Magic the Gathering, you might play like the Pauper format, which uses only common cards, which obviously are very easy to get hold of, cheap to buy and stuff. But even then, without all the huge stats, without all the flashy abilities and stuff, you can still have a lot of fun just using the basic cards, just because it's fun being challenged by somebody else. And so I kind of do want to keep that. I'm just trying to figure out how, because you kind of don't want to fight against other anarchists. So I'm still trying to figure out how it works. Maybe it's like, you know, I don't want it to be a case of like you are hurting another person's reputation or economy to try and prove yours right, because that goes back to the capitalist and competitive way of thinking, and it's meant to be a socialist game. So something like maybe whoever can get to 100 first, and then there's some kind of AI or some way of having maybe like a event deck, or like a random spawn deck of enemies, something like that, to try and make it that you are not fighting each other, but then maybe it's like a case of, well, there's an opportunity for something, a mission maybe, or like maybe there's a warehouse, but in order to get into it you need some amount of skilled infiltrators to raid it. Or maybe it's something like you can purchase like a new means of production, but only if you have the resources for it, and then maybe only one person will have the resources or have the people to infiltrate. So yeah, there's a bit of it I still need to flesh out. If you have ideas, that would be awesome. But the other part to this game is obviously, because I'm not wanting it to be monetizable, I want it to be open source. I want it to be available and accessible to everyone, no matter where their income level's at. I don't want to have things like rarity or like booster boxes or whatever. I want it to be a case of all the cards are available to you, so you can literally use any cards you want. You don't have to first unlock them or buy them or earn them. They're just free for you to use. Obviously there will be some restrictions as to what's like allowed in the deck, but you won't have to worry about not having the cards. And like, I would encourage, if things like tournaments took place with it, that they allowed people to use like printed out paper cards as well, so that you don't sort of gatekeep people to the official merch the way most CCGs do. So yeah, that's the card game idea in a nutshell. Still needs a bit of development on the concept side of it, but I think it'll be really fun if I can get it right and stuff. And it's just a fun experiment to try and sort of translate these political ideologies into game mechanics, because I think it is difficult, especially someone new to philosophy, new to radical leftist politics. It's hard for them to learn all of the stuff and to know how it all fits together, and so that's the idea for helping with that. Okay, next game idea. So now we are going back to like sort of like a video game vibe. This one is actually the one that isn't necessarily set in the universe of the book, although it kind of still is, but it's just kind of more set in like the current day, where like, so the characters in this game are only related to the universe in a sense that I'm related to the universe. So it would be like people who are specifically queer. It's very much a queer game, but it's basically to promote the creativity and to have like content creators unions and those kinds of, that's the idea. So it's like what I'm basically trying to do in real life almost, but in a game format, because I think it's also fun. And so that is to try and go from someone who is basically forced to work a job to then try and build a socialist economy in the real world. So in this case, you will have stuff like you will be able to get a job, but then you wouldn't play the job part. It would be like, okay, I'm going to work now, okay, I'm back from work now, and then it would be like, cool, your energy went down, maybe it's got a cost implication on your health or something, but then you would have to pay your costs, and then you would have some ability, so you would have some extra money and some extra time, and then you could like use that to do things like educating yourself, and then maybe you would be able to get like spend the time on your creative stuff, try and get like Patreon support for it and stuff, and then you would then basically have a view of like a city, but the whole city is going to be basically grayed out. All the buildings and stuff are going to be grayed out, except for whatever apartment your player is living in. Like their apartment will be colorful because that's where you are. And then as your character is more and more successful, you might want to basically try and get them to have like a really high paying job, and then use the extra money to then sponsor other creatives who maybe can't get high paying jobs, and try and boost them and add them to your union, and hopefully they can then have like an incubator vibe where they are able to work on their skills, work on their crafts, and get their own income sources, get like their own sort of audience and Patreon support going. So hopefully they eventually no longer need you to sponsor them, and maybe they can then get successful enough to be earning enough to start sponsoring others. But then, you know, maybe at first you'd like get someone would maybe like be crashing in a bed in your apartment as well with you, but then as you are both helping each other, and trying to focus your resources and time at freeing yourselves from needing to work for boss, you might then be able to start renting out and maybe eventually buying more apartments or even buildings in the city. And then as you do, it'll get colored in too. And so like maybe eventually the entire city is colorful because you've gotten everyone in it to abandon capitalism and be queer and join your union, and you are all surviving on mutual aid and stuff. And maybe one of your city buildings you'd convert into like a vertical farm or something. But the idea is just to have fun with it, and for it to be like, there are games where you have to do that kind of thing, but none of them have the like goal in mind to actually get off money. They're all about like succeeding within the capitalist world, not trying to build something on the side that isn't capitalism and grow it to a point where it can support you instead of capitalism. So that's what makes it different from other games, I guess. And you'd be able to basically choose what you want to do. Maybe you want to be a YouTuber or whatever, and you can start, design your character at the beginning. And so yeah, that's the one game that I guess isn't really part of the universe that my book's set in. And I think I'm going to tell you about another game now, which, well, I'm pretty sure I am. And now this game is going to be basically like a MOBA, but I want it to be something very low, like very minimalist, very low requirements, like resource-wise. So I want it to probably be like vector-based. And so it will be like something with a really small download size and very low bandwidth costs. And the idea then is I want to use basically the primitive shapes. So that's like triangle, circle, square, pentagon, hexagon. I'd probably stop at hexagon. And so the idea is that then each of those represents a different class. So I'm thinking circle might be your healer class, triangle could be like your assassin class, maybe square might be like your bruisers, maybe pentagons might be your sorry, I'm trying to also be driving. Might be like utility, and then hexagons might be your tanks. So, something like that. It doesn't have to be that, but that kind of thing. And then the graphics on like your abilities and stuff are going to then have something to do with the shape that you are. So you moving this shape around the battlefield, and then when, say, you're a circle and you're casting spells, there would be spells that have like circle hit areas or emanate out of you in a circle, or that kind of thing. Whereas the triangle, maybe whichever you would be able to choose maybe which of the three sides, and then the side that's selected would be the one that you are shooting out of, for example, or you would be able to shoot out in a cone type shape. And maybe whoever's a square, they might be able to create walls. But again, so kind of similar to how in Heroes of the Storm you can choose different talents. That's going to be the idea, where you choose the skills that your character has, and as you level up, you then are able to progress down a tech path of upgrading the character in that particular skill. So not 100% like HOTS, because HOTS, it's like kind of trying to boost your base abilities and stuff as well. Whereas this one, you literally would be able to choose like almost like a subclass if you want to, or multi-subclass, but then you can pump into one if you wanted, and the next game maybe pump into a different one, and make up a strategy, maybe a meta game where you think, okay, this will be better against this opponent, etc. And yeah, so the idea with that is to also make it like open source and stuff like that, accessible, and basically have just have a MOBA that isn't like corporate owned, that isn't trying to monetize the hell out of you, and that is something easy to jump into, and you know, it might have a limited hero set, but the complexity will come out of how you choose to use the heroes. And so rather than having to learn how all these different heroes in their own thing, you need to learn which of the different strategies the different classes have. And yeah, I think it would be cool. I also really like the idea of team XP, so I would want to do that. And I think that would be really cool, especially because like I'm not really keen on Blizzard anymore, and I don't really want to invest in other MOBAs where they're like kind of monetized and they're kind of corporate owned, and you know, it's like it's just not my vibe, and it's not that fun. And if it is also like a low resource thing, you know, maybe you can get it to be playable and easy to play on devices like phones as well as desktop, and play against each other. It'd be pretty cool. So yeah, that's basically the next set of games I wanted to tell you about, and obviously don't have any idea when I'm gonna be working on these, but if you really want me to work on them, you can always get hold of my Patreon or whatever. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Bye.